He inherited a house in a town with a dark secret, where an ancient evil wakes every 27 years. Now, it's hunting him, a shape-shifting clown that feeds on fear. To survive, he must conquer his deepest terrors. ... or become its next victim. This is the rust of Derry. The moving van groaned as it disgorged the final, sorry-looking armchair onto the cracked concrete driveway. Leo wiped a sleeve across his forehead, leaving a grimy streak on his skin. Derry, Maine. The name sounded like a sigh, a place people ended up, not a place they chose. That's the last of it, Mr. Vance, the mover said, his voice flat. He didn't wait for a reply, just climbed into his cab and rumbled away, leaving Leo alone in the deep, unsettling silence of 29 Neibolt Street. The house was a Victorian dowager who had let herself go, peeling paint curled like dead skin. The wraparound porch sagged in the middle, and one of the upper windows was a cyclops eye, boarded up with plywood. It was all his aunt had left him, a woman he'd met twice in his life. The inheritance felt less like a gift and more like a burden she'd finally managed to offload. Inside, the air was thick and still, smelling of dust, old wood, and something else. Something faintly metallic, like the scent of a handful of old pennies. Leo pushed open a window, the frame screaming in protest. The late afternoon sun did little to warm the chill seeping from the walls. He was a writer, or at least, he used to be. A failed novel and a cratered bank account in New York had driven him here. Toti's cheap free house, in a town he'd never heard of. Maybe the quiet would help him write, or maybe it would just swallow him whole. The first night, the silence was absolute. It was a physical presence, pressing in on his ear. He slept fitfully on a mattress on the floor, the unfamiliar sounds of the old house settling around him like the creaking bones of a giant. It was on the third day that the noises started, not the groans and pops of an aging structure, but something else, a faint, high-pitched whistling. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, a tuneless, airy sound that would start and stop at random. Leo would be scrubbing decades of grime from the kitchen sink, and it would begin, a sound like a tea kettle boiling in a distant room. He'd stop, listen, and it would vanish. "Old pipes," he muttered to himself, the sound of his own voice a comfort, just air in the old pipes. But the explanation felt thin. The whistling had a quality to it, a mocking, almost intelligent lilt. He ventured into town for supplies. The Derry Main Street was a monument to faded American ambition. A few dusty storefronts were still open, but many were boarded up. The people moved with a slow, deliberate pass of their eyes, sliding away from his when he tried to make contact. There was a pall over the place, a collective exhaustion. At the hardware store, the old man behind the counter, whose name tag read Al, barely grunted as he rang up Leo's cleaning supplies. "Place needs a lot of work," Leo offered. "Trying for friendly." "Neibolt Street, ain't it?" Al said, not looking up. "That place has a history." "Yeah." "What kind of history?" Al's eyes, milky with cataracts, finally met his. "The kind folks in Derry don't talk about. You hear things. You ignore 'em. You see things. You look the other way. That's how you get by in Derry." A cold finger traced its way down Leo's spine. "See things? Like what?" But Al just shook his head and shoved the bag across the counter. The conversation clearly over. That night, the whistling was louder. It was joined by a new sound. A soft, rhythmic scraping, like something being dragged across the bare floorboards in the room above him. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He was alone in the house. He'd checked every room. He grabbed the heavy mag light he'd bought and crept up the stairs, each step groaning under his weight. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness. The scraping was coming from the room at the end, the one with the boarded-up window. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open, the beam of his flashlight cutting a wobbly path through the gloom. The room was empty, save for a few dust-covered sheets draped over forgotten furniture. In the center of the floor, directly under the boarded window, was a long, clean scrape in the thick dust, as if a heavy trunk had been recently moved. But there was nothing there. And then the whistling started again, not from the walls, but right behind him. Espunaron, flashlight beam, dancing wildly. The hallway was empty. The sound faded, replaced by the frantic thumping of his own heart. He was losing it. The isolation, the stress, it was getting to him. He decided to explore the basement the next morning, a task he'd been dreading. The door was a heavy, warped thing set into the kitchen floor. He yanked it open, and a wave of damp, frigid air, carrying that coppery penny smell in its fullest, most nauseating strength, washed over him. The stairs were steep and rickety. The basement was a cavern of shadows, his flashlight revealing a landscape of forgotten junk, broken furniture, stacks of yellowing newspapers, and a corroded furnace that looked like a sleeping iron beast. The walls were rough-hewn stone, slick with moisture. And that's when he saw them. The balloons, a cluster of them, tied to a rusted pipe, bobbed gently in the dead, still air. They were a garish red, the color of fresh blood. Their rubbery skins glistened in his light. Who could have put them here? The movers. Kids playing a prank. He took a step closer, and one of the balloons slowly rotated. There was no string, no ribbon. It was as if they were growing from the pipe itself. As it turned, he saw that the side facing away from him was not red, but white, and on it was painted a simple, childish smile. A jolt of pure, primal fear shot through him. It was just a balloon, but the sight of that smile in this dark, forgotten place felt deeply, profoundly wrong. A soft, giggling whisper echoed through the basement, seeming to come from every direction at once. It was a high, watery sound, full of malicious glee. They all float down here. Leo froze, his blood turning to ice. The voice was right behind him, right in his ear. He could feel a puff of cold, foul breath on his neck. He screamed, a raw, panicked sound, and scrambled back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut and leaning against it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was not alone. He was not imagining things. He spent the rest of the day in a fugue state of terror, boarding up the basement door with planks of wood he found in the garage. The sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows through the filthy windows. He sat in the living room, the mag light held like a club, listening. For a long time, there was nothing. Then, a new sound, a soft, melodic tapping at the window. Tap, tap, tap. He forced himself to look. Outside, standing on his overgrown lawn in the deepening twilight, was a clown. It wore a baggy silver suit with oversized orange pom-poms, and its face was chalk white, with a red, bulbous nose. Its smile was a gash of crimson lipstick, stretching far too wide for its face. But its eyes, they were a piercing, ancient yellow, and they held no mirth. Only a bottomless, hungry intelligence. It held a bouquet of red balloons in one hand, and with the other, it was gently tapping a long, yellow fingernail against the glass. It saw him looking, and its smile widened, showing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. "Hello, Leo," it said, its voice a silken, friendly baritone that was somehow more terrifying than the whisper in the basement. "I'm Pennywise, the dancing clown. We're going to have so much fun together." Leo stumbled back, tripping over a box and crashing to the floor. When he looked up, the clown was gone. Only the memory of that smile remained, burned onto his retina. He was not safe. The horror was not in his head. It was outside his window, and it knew his name. Leo didn't sleep. He spent the night huddled in a corner, every creak and rustle sending fresh jolts of adrenaline through his system. The rational part of his brain, the part that had written about monsters as metaphors, had been completely dismantled. It had seen Italiano, he had heard it. The thing was real. With the first gray light of dawn, he fled the house. He drove into Derry, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, and went straight to the police station. It was a small, brick building that looked as tired as the rest of the town. The officer at the desk was a large, weird-looking man with a nameplate that read Officer Bowers. He listened to Leo's frantic, jumbled story with an expression of profound boredom. "A clown," Bowers repeated, his voice flat. "Yes, In my yard. It spoke to me, and there were balloons in my basement, and whispers. Leo's words tumbled over each other. Bowers sighed. A long-suffering sound. Mr. Vance. Neibolt Street. Look, I'm gonna give you the same advice everyone in this town gets. You're new. You're stressed. That old house makes noises. You had a bad dream. It wasn't a dream, Leo insisted, his voice cracking. His eyes. They were yellow. A shadow passed over Bowers' face, a flicker of something that looked uncomfortably like fear, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by the mask of official disinterest. We get reports like this sometimes, especially from folks out on Neibolt. Kids playing pranks, your mind playing tricks. There's no clown. Go home. Get some rest. Maybe lay off the booze. Humiliated and furious. Leo left. The town, which had seemed merely dreary before, now felt sinister. The people on the street weren't just tired. They were willfully blind. They knew. Hal? At the hardware store knew. Bowers. She knew. Bowers. She knew. They all knew something was wrong with this town, and their only strategy was to pretend it wasn't there. He went to the town library, a Carnegie building that smelled of old paper and defeat. Maybe he could find something, some record of what had happened at 29 Neibolt Street. The librarian, a mousy woman named Mrs. Kershaw, was initially reluctant, but Leo, using the last of his charm, convinced her. He was a writer researching local history. In the archives, buried in microfiche of old Derry news issues, he found it, not a definitive answer, but a pattern, a series of articles, spaced roughly every 27 years. September 1930. Loku boy, 6, found dead in canal. Police baffled. August 1957. 2 children vanish on Neibolt Street. Search yields no clues. Winter 1984. A spate of child disappearances rocks the small town. The article was vague, citing an unknown predator. The final paragraph mentioned bizarre reports from surviving children of a dancing clown in red balloons. The case was never officially solved. Every 27 years, a cycle. He was here at the wrong time. The thought was a cold stone in his gut. He was so absorbed in his research he didn't notice the man sitting at the other end of the microfiche reader table until he spoke. It always comes back. Leo, jump it. The man was probably in his late 30s, with a haggard face and eyes that had seen too much. He wore a simple janitor's uniform. What? The cycle, the man said, his voice low and intense. Every 27 years, it wakes up. It hits hungry. And then it goes back to sleep. You're poking at it. That's not safe. You know about the clown? Leo whispered. My name is Mike Hanlon, the man said. My family has been in Derry for generations. We're the ones who remember. The others, they choose to forget. It's easier that way. But some of us, we can't. Mike told him a story then, a story he'd heard from his father, who heard it from a story of an ancient, shapeless thing that slept beneath the town, fed on the fear of its people, and preferred the taste of children. It could become your worst nightmare. But its favorite face was that of a clown. Pennywise. It's real, Leo breathed, the confirmation both terrifying and validating. It's more than real, Mike said. It's the town, and the town is it. It feeds on fear, Mr. Vance. Right now, it's feeding on yours. What do I do? You leave, Mike said, his eyes full of pity. You get in your car and you drive, and you never, ever look back. That's the only way to survive. But Leo couldn't leave. He had no money, no place to go. And besides, a stubborn, writerly part of him was now fascinated. This was the ultimate story. The real monster. That night, armed with Mike's warnings and a desperate, foolish courage, he decided to confront it. He went down into the basement, prying the boards off the door. The balloons were gone. The coppery smell was stronger. He stood in the center of the damp space. I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, his voice echoing hollowly. Laughter answered him. Not from one place, but from the very stones. It was Pennywise's laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy at his stupidity. "Oh, but you are, Leo," the voice cooed from the darkness near the furnace. "You are so afraid. And you taste so fresh." The shadows in the corner began to writhe and coalesce. They thickened, tugging on form. It wasn't the clown this time. It was the pile of forgotten sheets. They rose up, twisting into a tall, slender, faceless figure. Its head was a featureless white oval, and its arms were too long, ending in sharp points. It was the thing from a nightmare he'd had as a child. A thing that used to wait in the dark hallway outside his bedroom door. It began to glide towards him, moving with an unnatural, jerky grace, a dry rustling sound accompanying its movement. Leo's bravado evaporated. This was his fear, given form, the primal terror of the faceless thing in the dark. A backed away his heart, trying to beat its way out of his chest. No. The thing lunged. Leo screamed and fled back up the stairs, the rustling sound right on his heels. He slammed the basement door and threw his weight against it, feeling a tremendous impact from the other side. He stayed there all night, until the sun rose and the house fell silent once more. He was a prisoner in his own home. He couldn't leave, and he couldn't stay. The thing was toying with him, savoring his terror. He saw it everywhere. Now, a flash of silver in the periphery of his vision. A red balloon tied to his mailbox. The faint sound of a calliope playing a distorted carnival tune on the edge of hearing. He stopped eating. Sleep was impossible. He sat by the window, watching the street, a shell of the man he had been. The fear was a cancer, consuming him from the inside out. He was giving it exactly what it wanted. One afternoon, he found a single, dead fly on his kitchen table. Then another, and another. Soon, there was a small pile of them. He looked up and saw them crawling on the ceiling, a slow, black, buzzing mass. They began to drop, landing in his hair, on his arms, their tiny legs tickling his skin. He swatted at them frantically, but for every one he killed, 10 more seemed to appear. They filled the air, a cloud of iridescent green and black, their buzzing becoming a deafening roar. He could feel them in his mouth, his nose, his ears. He was drowning in flies. And through the buzzing, he heard the giggle. Pennywise was enjoying the show. This was it. This was how he would die. Not with a bang, but with a buzz. Driven insane by a monster that fed on his bunkway. The flies vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. Leo was on his hands and knees on the floor, gagging, clawing at his face. The phantom sensation of 1,000 tiny legs still crawled over his skin. It was broken. The fear had won. He had nothing left. He looked at the boarded-up basement door. There was no point in running. Mike Hanlon was right. The thing was the town, and the town was a trap. There was no escape. A strange, fatalistic calm descended upon him. If this was the end, he would not die cowering in a corner. He would go to it. He would look it in its ancient, yellow eyes. With trembling hands, he pried the boards off the basement door for the last time. The stench of pennies and decay was overpowering. He picked up his mag light and descended the stairs, each step feeling like a walk to the gallows. The basement was different. The junk was gone. The space seemed to have expanded into a vast, dark cavern. The stone walls glistened with a strange, phosphorescent fungus, casting a sickly green light. In the center of the space was a gaping, black well, an abyss that seemed to have no bottom. The air thrummed with a low, malevolent energy, and sitting on the edge of the well, legs swinging like a child's, was Penny. "I knew you'd come down for the party," Leo had said, its voice a cheerful sick. The clown form was more grotesque up close. The white makeup was cracked in places, showing gray, scaly skin beneath. The red of its smile was like a raw wound. "What are you?" Leo asked, his voice a dry rasp. I am the eater of worlds, it said, tilting its head. I am the pain in the dark. I am the voice that whispers you're not good enough. I am every lonely thought you've ever had. But mostly, it giggled, a sound like breaking glass. I am hungry. It stood up, and its form began to blur and shift. The silver suit melted into tattered robes. The clown's face stretched, the features running like wet clay, reforming into the likeness of his Aunt Ethel, the woman who had left him this cursed house. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken and accusatory. You were always a disappointment, Leo. The thing wearing his aunt's face. I said, a failed writer. A waste of space. You couldn't even succeed at failure. This is all you deserve. The form shifted again, becoming his literary agent from New York. The manuscript is unsalvageable, Leo. No one cares about your stories. You have nothing to say. Then it became his own father, a monoad and T-scene in 20 years. You're weak, just like I always said you were. Each transformation was a psychic blow, digging up every insecurity, every shameful memory, every drop of self-loathing he had ever felt. The thing was weaving a tapestry of his deepest fears, not of monsters, but of himself. Stop, Leo whispered, sinking to his knees. Why? The thing asked. Now returned to its clown form. It loomed over him, its yellow eyes burning like sulphurous stars. This is the best part, the feast before the main course. Your fear is delicious. It leaned in close, its breath a foul miasma of an opened grave. They all flowed down here, Leo. Images flooded his mind, horrific and vivid. He saw children, dozens of teams suspended in the darkness of the well. Their faces were pale and serene, their eyes wide and unseeing, drifting in the void like astronauts in a black sea. They were all floating. You'll float, too, Pennywise whispered, its mouth unhinging like a snake's, opening wider and wider, revealing not teeth, but a swirling vortex of lights and colors, a gateway to some unthinkable elsewhere. It was going to consume him, body and soul. This was it. The end. He was going to become another forgotten tragedy in the long, bloody history of Derry. But as he stared into that chaotic, hungry maw, something in him finally snapped. Not into madness, but into clarity. This thing, for all its power, was a bully, a predator. It fed on fear, because that was its nature, but it was also its limitation. Mike had said it. It feeds on fear. What was left if he had no fear to give? He thought of the children, the ones who had died here, the ones in the well. He thought of their stolen lives. A hot, clean anger began to burn away the icy terror in his veins. This thing was a parasite, a cosmic leech, and he was tired of being its food. He looked up at the clown, and for the first time, he did not see an all-powerful monster. He saw a pathetic, hungry thing hiding behind a mask. He laughed. It was a dry, broken sound, but it was real. Pennywise recoiled as if struck. The massive mouth snapped shut. The yellow eyes narrowed in confusion, and, for the first time, something that looked like annoyance. What? What is so funny? Meat? It hissed. You, Leo said, pushing himself to his feet. His legs felt weak, but they held. You're a joke, a tired, old, repeating joke. You're not a god. You're a pest, an infestation. I am eternal, it roared, the sound shaking the very foundations of the house. Its form flickered, growing larger, more monstrous, sprouting claws and mandibles. But Leo stood his ground. The anger was a shield. You're nothing. You feed on children because you're too weak to face anyone who can fight back. My fear. You can't have it anymore. I reject you. He took a step forward. I am Leo Vance. I am a writer. And your story is boring. A shriek of pure, undiluted rage erupted from Pennywise. The illusion of the cavern wavered. The walls became stone again, The well shrank back to a simple drain in the floor. The clown's form became smaller, less substantial, as if Leo's disbelief was literally erasing it. "I'll feast on your entrails," it screeched, lunging at him. But Leo didn't flinch, stood firm, pouring all his will, all his anger, all his newfound defiance into a single, focused thought. "You have no power over me." Pennywise stopped an inch from his face. Its claws, which moments before could have ripped him apart, seemed to pass through him like smoke. The yellow eyes were wide with shock and fury. The thing was deflating, its power source cut off. "No," it whispered, its voice now small and reedy. "This is not how it ends." "Yes," Leo said, his voice steady. "It is." With a final, wet, popping sound, like a balloon bursting, the form of Pennywise the dancing clown dissolved into a cloud of mist. The mist swirled for a moment in the dank air, and then, with a sound like a sigh, it was sucked down into the drain in the floor and was gone. The basement was just a basement again, dark, damp, and filled with junk. The oppressive energy was gone. The coppery smell was fading, replaced by the ordinary scent of mildew. Leo stood there for a long time, breathing heavily, his body trembling with post-adrenaline shock. It had done Italiano. He had faced the monster and won not with a weapon, but with his mind. He walked up the stairs and out of the house. The morning sun had never felt so warm. The grass had never looked so green. The air had never smelled so clean. He got in his car and drove to the library. Mike Hanlon was mopping the floor. He looked up as Leo entered, and his eyes widened. He saw the change in him immediately. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a hard-won peace. "You're still here," Mike said, a statement of fact. "It's gone," Leo replied. "For now." Mike nodded slowly. "You faced it. You beat it." He didn't look happy. Hooster signed. "It will be back. In 27 years. "I know," Leo said. He looked out the library window at the sleepy, complicit town of Derry. "But I won't be." He drove back to Neibolt Street only once, to pack a single bag. He didn't look at the basement door. He got in his car and pointed it south, away from Maine, away from the silence and the rust and the lurking horror beneath the surface. He didn't know where he was going, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like freedom. He had a story to write, a true story about a clown, a haunted town, and the simple, revolutionary power of saying no to fear. As he crossed the town line, he rolled down the window and breathed in the free air. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that somewhere in the dark, deep below Derry, something was sleeping and dreaming of the next time it could wake up and feed. But for now, Leo Vance was floating, and he was free.